It wasn't even noon yet, and I was already sipping my beer, pondering my dilemma. How do you tell someone that you suspect their wife is cheating on them? Especially if you like that person but aren't a close friend. If it were my brother, it wouldn't be hard. I'd sit him down and tell him the truth. But this guy was my wife's boss, and I certainly didn't want him shooting the messenger or taking it out on my wife if I was wrong. We needed to keep her job intact, at least for a while. Almost half of our family's income came from her real estate agency work, and I certainly didn't want to rock the boat if I was wrong in my suspicions. Proudmoore Realty wasn't just in the business of selling houses. Carl Proudmoore was also a real estate developer. He had gotten into the business about 2 years ago and had gotten good results. His last project was a gated community that sold homes starting at $400,000. I know you can buy a shack for that kind of money in some parts of the country, but here, doctors and lawyers live in those houses. And apparently the properties were selling well. In the last 6 months, my wife's commissions have skyrocketed and even exceeded my own income. Sarah had had several jobs over the years, but none of them paid as well as this one, nor did she enjoy it as much. When we met in college, she was an English and political science major. She ruled out law school early and settled for a teaching certificate. That career lasted only 2 years. She realized that dealing with young children other than her own was not her forte. Around this time, she became pregnant with our first child and happily embraced motherhood. 2 more children followed. I was happy when she decided enough was enough and had her tubes tied. The IUD wasn't working for her, and she just hated the side effects of the pill. I offered her surgery as an alternative, but she made the decision to have a tubal ligation while in the hospital after the birth of our third child. She was a good mom, happy to stay home and run the household as long as she could attend classes at the same time. I swear she had so many college degrees that if she had concentrated them in a few areas, she could have had at least 3 PhDs. I mean, she had taken classes in every subject under the sun, from business to anthropology. I tried to press her when she came home with nets, waders, and a snake stick for her herpetology class. It didn't work, and soon we had frogs, lizards, and snakes in jars and cages all over the house, some dead in preservative and some alive. But nothing appealed to her as a possible career until she decided to take a real estate class. At the first brokerage she worked at, she sold enough to cover her expenses, including a decent closet. She blamed it on not being able to make a real profit in a soft market. I'd always heard that 10% of agents make 90% of their sales. But when she started working for Carl, her sales skyrocketed. Carl claimed it was because Sarah could talk to her high-end clients about almost any topic. I guess all those college courses were finally paying off. I know that Sarah looked like an energetic young professional. She held herself with confidence and dignity. At 44, she had the same trim body she had at 30-something. She kept herself in shape and didn't need the support of a special bra or girdle to look good in a dress. She was still as pretty as the cute girl from the neighbor's yard. We were the same age, but I wasn't as good-looking myself. I kept myself in decent shape and exercised regularly, but it was mostly for my heart health. I'd never been muscular and never aspired to be. I inherited premature gray hair from my father and X-linked baldness from my mother. When I went out with my wife, people who didn't know us well thought I must have money to get and keep a beautiful woman who was clearly younger than me by at least 15 years. I had heard a similar remark more than once over the past few years. I glanced at my watch, trying to decide if I wanted to have another beer and write this day off completely as work or tackle one of my current projects before I got drunk. For now, I could put my worries aside for later. The decision was made for me when the doorbell rang. I got up and opened the door. I certainly wasn't happy to see the cause of my anxiety standing on my doorstep. Amelia Proudmoore looked slightly nervous as she greeted me. "I think we need to talk," she said hesitantly. "Well, I need to ask you a favor, Mr. Saturn. Ty." I understood her nervousness. Apparently, she had seen me this morning at the local Denny's while I was having lunch with 2 of my co-workers. "Come on in the house," I said. I was trying to think of what to say to my wife's boss's wife. I decided to be polite and offer her something to drink. Would you like something to drink? I can make you some coffee or tea, or if you'd like something stronger. She smiled surprised and nodded at the beer in my hand. I think a beer would be nice. I made my way to the kitchen, grabbed one, and offered her a glass. She shook her head as she unscrewed the lid, catching me off guard again. I looked at her carefully, inviting her to take a seat in the living room. She was dressed just as she had been that morning, in a stylish summer dress that didn't hide her lush figure in the slightest. I knew she was 36, 8 years younger than her husband and me, for that matter. She looked like the stereotypical trophy wife. I'd met her socially a few times. The most recent time was last weekend at a dinner when her husband and my wife attended a real estate banquet. We were seated at the same table. She called me Mr. Saturn until I corrected her and told her to call me Ty, which is short for Tyler. I told her that despite my gray hair, I wasn't old enough to call me Minner. Yet. She stammered that my face looked young, but with gray hair, and when she pointed to her head, I realized she was referring to my bald top. I laughed out loud, and that calmed her down. I wasn't in the mood to host this woman for long. Getting to the point, I said, "Okay, Amelia, I think I know what this is going to be about. What do you want to say?" My tone, expressing impatience or perhaps desperation, must have surprised her. It certainly made her tense up. "I was hoping you wouldn't say anything to your wife or my husband about seeing me this morning," she said hesitantly. "I know you heard me say Saturday night that I wasn't going to be in town this week. And then you found me at a local restaurant." "Oh yeah, I definitely saw her. She was sitting at Denny's with two men, neither of whom was her husband. It could have been a casual meal, but then again, you don't hold hands with the guy you're having breakfast with if it's a casual meal." There was no social distancing here. The guy holding her hand could be called a stud. He was in his early 30s, wearing a sport shirt. He held Amelia's hand and patted it while they talked to the second man. What he did when he slipped out of the stall convinced me that their relationship wasn't casual. He reached down and picked up her purse and held it until she got to her feet. Touching a woman's purse without her holding it out to you is not the norm. At least where I come from, it's not the norm. He put his arm around Amelia and kissed her. I snorted when Amelia offered the next line. "It's not what it seems." Her eyes widened when I chuckled. "Seriously, I saw you watching me when we were about to leave. I knew I'd better talk to you before you said anything." It took me a while to find Sarah's address. I drove straight there. I must have looked amused at her audacity. "Holy shit," she exclaimed. "I've got a problem here, and I need your help." I was close to saying I wasn't going to help her hide the affair when she said, "My husband is having fun with me. I know it, but I don't have any proof yet. I can't let him know that I suspect something, not now. I don't have any concrete proof yet." "Wait a minute. So who were the two men you were with at the Denny's?" I asked, stunned by this new development. She explained that one of them was a private investigator she had hired. The other was her brother. "So the bodybuilder who patted your arm and kissed you was your brother?" "He was there to support me and help me. I've been living in his house for a week now. Carl would never go near his house. He thinks my brother's gayness might be passed on to him or something." They hardly talk, even though Brad and I are very close. My dilemma was solved. "So the guy who held your hand and kissed you is gay?" I shook my head. "I saw him walking you out with his hand on your back, and I thought he was your lover. I thought you were the one cheating on Carl. That man doesn't look gay at all." "Your gay radar isn't that good, is it?" laughed Amelia. "You must really be a Boy Scout, like Carl said." I must have looked as shocked as I felt. "Carl said you were naive and rather religious. He said you're straight and narrow in your beliefs." "What?" I asked. "He said that about me? I've met him a few times, but I've never talked about anything important. I have no idea how he got that impression." "Well, he said all you do is sit at home and play video games. I pictured one of those guys in their underwear in Mom's basement playing on the computer all day long," Amelia said. "And last weekend at the banquet, you looked really awkward in a suit and tie. I got the impression that all you did was play computer games. I mean, the way Carl described you, you looked like some kind of man-child. Carl has no idea, I stated confidently. I have 3 kids. 2 are in college and 1 is graduating from high school. My life is active. Yes, I hate wearing a tie. And the shirt I was wearing last Saturday night was small in the neckline. Sarah bought me a new shirt for the banquet and got me one that had a half-inch smaller neck. I don't usually wear more than a sport shirt when I go out. At home, I usually wear t-shirts and jeans. I started laughing. Like this t-shirt. It said, I don't need Google. My wife knows everything. Underneath it, it said, Cozumel, Mexico. I bought this t-shirt as a teaser for all those courses Sarah took in college. I'm not a recluse. We travel when we can. And as for me playing computer games, that's true. I laughed, completely amused. I'm a senior programmer at Horizon Games. My job is to not only understand the games people want to play, but also to create new ones. So I'm constantly testing and comparing my competitors' games. Oh, I had no idea, Amelia said crushingly. I had the wrong impression. I apologize if I offended you. I shrugged. But I still need you not to say a word about seeing me this week. Carl thinks I'm visiting my mom, and I'm hoping he decides to use my house to have some fun with his girlfriend while I'm gone. Right now, this investigator is installing a wiretap in my house. Video cameras, listening devices. What I really need you to do is not let me know I'm still in town. You can't even tell your wife. Sarah will either blab or blab. Okay, I have to admit. I thought you were the one joking around, I said. I don't usually sit around and drink like this, but I sure as hell hated seeing you at the Denny's this morning. I like Carl, and Sarah really thinks well of him. I'll keep my mouth shut. But damn it. I just have to say it. Maybe it's the 3 beers, but why the hell didn't Carl even think about entertaining you? I stammered for a bit, then said, I mean, you're just a fox. That's very nice of you, but I understand the second part of that statement, Amelia said, her blush at my praise turning into a chuckle. You think of me as a typical trophy wife. I've heard that before. I think Carl likes to maintain that impression sometimes. I've even heard him tell people he made me like I built him. But the only surgery I've had was an appendicitis operation. Not many people know that I graduated from Vassar. I have a master's degree in business administration. I'm not stupid, but I'm begging you. Please don't give him the slightest hint that I suspect him. I must let him go about his ordinary business. Tears came to her eyes and she began to tremble slightly. I'm truly sorry, said I, hugging this poor distraught woman. I'll keep what I saw this morning to myself. If you need any help, let me know. I have a few skills that can help. She threw me a puzzled look. I was a pretty good hacker before I got into game design. I still consult for the cybersecurity guys. Maybe I can help you with something. At the moment I said that, I had no idea what was in store for us. She thanked me and got up to leave. Before I opened the door, I looked out the window. Oh shit, we have a little problem. My neighbor across the street mows the grass. He's retired and sometimes spends hours messing around outside. He'll probably notice you leaving, and even if he doesn't say anything to me, he'll certainly tell his wife that a beautiful woman left my house in the middle of the day. Where's your car? My car is at home. I thought about the fact that Carl uses GPS to keep track of me and know where I am, even if it's just a trip to the airport, in case he gets suspicious or wants to avoid me. Amelia explained. I took an Uber at the airport, as if I were flying out and rented a car there. I parked it on the street 3 houses down. I thought about the fact that someone might notice a strange car in your driveway. Smart girl. Okay, secret squirrel, I said, smirking. You've got a lot on your mind. But while you were playing Nancy Drew, were you thinking about your cell phone? It's an easy way to find out where someone is. Find My Phone apps are easy to install. She said she checked but didn't see such an app. Give me your phone and I'll check it out. I walked her into my office. Oh, crap, she exclaimed, looking around the room as we walked in. I had shelves littered with computer disks and remote storage devices. Various joysticks and virtual reality headsets filled another shelf. This looks like a gamer's dream. She giggled. It's how I make a living. I need to keep up with the times. Everything here is state-of-the-art, said I, sitting down and clicking the mouse button. My monitor came to life. I pointed her to the second chair where my son usually sat when we played games together. I examined her phone and was pleased to see that it was a newer model and I had the right cable to connect it to the computer. I pressed a few keys and saw a list of programs appear. I opened one of them and took a quick look at the lines of code. I announced that her phone and SIM card were clean. "What are you doing?" she asked, concerned that I had removed the cover and started taking the phone apart. Another way to tap a phone is to physically add a device, I explained. The easiest and simplest is right here in the battery compartment. It only takes a few minutes to install and turns your phone into a listening device. Few people open their phone even if they suspect someone is monitoring their movements. That's not the case here. You're safe. Would you like me to add an app so you can locate Carl? Her eyes sparkled as she nodded her head. After a few seconds, I downloaded the program and added Carl's phone number. Okay, to activate it, you need to call him and keep him on the line for about a minute. Come up with a good excuse for that. I'll do the rest. As soon as Carl answered, I hit the enter key to start the download. Hi, Carl. I wanted to call and tell you I'm here, said Amelia cheerfully. Mom isn't feeling well. She wants me to come home in case it's COVID. But I think I should stay here in case she needs my help. What do you think? Do you think I should take a chance and stay with her? Or get a hotel room and just be around in case I'm needed? I may have to take her somewhere to get tested. If she tests positive for COVID and I get infected, I'll have to go into quarantine. And then it could be weeks before I can go home. They talked for a bit, and when I nodded, she cut the conversation short, saying she'd keep him posted. Carl sounded pretty normal, except that he seemed to like the idea of you seeing your mom, even if it might get you quarantined. I offered. What did he do that made you think he was having an affair? It was just a subtle change in his behavior. He's not as attentive as he used to be. Always too tired to have fun. He stays up late claiming he's having showings. And on top of our lives being affected, he's nailed down some other personal issues. Doesn't even want to talk about them, said Amelia. I started to laugh. You're blatantly telling me that your life got hurt and it's not a personal issue? Amelia blushed. I wasn't going to tell you the whole story of my life. But I like you and I trust you, said Amelia. Do we have time? It would be awkward if your wife or any of your children caught you here. I assured her that my son would be at school for a few more hours, and Sarah texted me that she would be staying late tonight. I explained that I planned to drive her back to where she was staying, and she could come back and rent a car later. I just need some time to sober up completely before I drive. Okay. Carl is my second husband. My first died in Afghanistan. We didn't have any children. We wanted to wait until he was done with his military service. So I was 30 years old when I met Carl. He said he wanted to have children someday, but wanted to put it off for a while. I thought that was reasonable. A little less than 2 years ago, I started trying to get pregnant. Nothing was working. I had tests and found out that there was nothing wrong with me. Finally, Carl admitted that he'd had surgery. He had a vasectomy years ago after having 2 children with his first wife, but never told me about it. He kept chickening out when I talked him into trying to reverse the surgery. It caused some pretty strong arguments. I loved the guy and wanted to have his kids, but I was still resentful that he wasn't honest with me when we first started dating. I know it's petty, but I'm not sure I would have gotten involved with him if I knew he was infertile. I thought you already had kids, I offered. The other night you were asking me about popular video games suitable for teenagers. I got the impression that you were doing some research on games. I have a niece and nephew, my brother's kids. That caught me off guard. I asked if this was the same brother I'd seen this morning who she said was gay. No, the same one. Brad is a contract lawyer and he and I have some business in common. Some people are a little intolerant of his lifestyle. Another thing you should know because it concerns you is that Carl is not a developer, as he claims. He is a front. I am behind it all, so I control the wallets and actually take care of the business side of our development. Carl is a great salesman. Hell, he could sell ice to an Eskimo. But he'd be out of line if he tried to run things, and I wouldn't control him. And it's a constant struggle. He wants to sell houses ahead of time. I don't think it's fiscally prudent to go that far in advance. So, since I control the purse strings and my brother Brad has a contract in my favor, I have an opportunity to step on the gas. But doesn't Carl get half the profits if he does cheat and you divorce him? I asked. No. The money comes from the trust fund our father set up for Brad and me. We can manage the money, but we can't make a dime of profit. That's the beauty of it. We get a relatively small allowance from the trust each month. Carl gets a sales commission, which is about $24,000 per house. It depends on who sells the property, how much actually goes to him, but he has exclusive listing rights to what we build. So we can indirectly increase our income. But each house is a separate contract. Brad insisted on it. He and Carl don't get along. So Carl could lose his contracts to sell the houses you're building, I said, thinking about how that might affect my own family's income. Amelia nodded. Carl advertises himself as a real estate developer, so it gives him a little boost in the regular resale market as well, and really boosts his ego. My mom says he's all fluff and no substance. Amelia grinned. I hope Carl isn't stupid enough to actually cheat on you. I would hate for my wife to lose that part of her income, said I. Amelia assured me that she would make sure Sarah was protected since I was so helpful. Enough time passed that I could drive in peace. The coffee I brewed while we talked helped considerably. We walked out to the garage and got into my sedan. Amelia started giggling, leaning back in the passenger seat so much that she almost lay down. I haven't had to hide like this since I was 18 when I was sneaking off to my boyfriend. I knew no one could see her. I suggested she ask Brad to bring her back to rent it. We decided that I would drive around the block and drop her off. She said the walk wouldn't kill her. Before she got out of the car, she reached out and took my right hand and squeezed it, thanking me for my help. With guilt, I realized that I was enjoying her company. But I was a happily married man, and there was nothing I could or would do about it. As an excuse for not getting home so soon after leaving, I made a quick trip to the grocery store. Who's playing Secret Squirrel now? I chided myself, amused. I was already back home and hard at work on the computer when I heard my youngest son come home from school. He peeked into my office to tell me he was home. Okay, let me know when you want to eat, I said. We'll grill some hamburgers. It's just you and me tonight. Your mom is working late. She has a late show and she'll be eating dinner by herself. Again? Asked Sam. She seems to be working late 2 or 3 times a week lately. I said that yes, but that she was making money at the same time, and there was nothing wrong with working hard. But his remark served as a wake-up call, especially after Amelia Proudmoore's visit. It was nearly 8 o'clock when Sarah showed up. She greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and then went to our bedroom to change. She returned a few minutes later, dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt, and walked into the kitchen. Have you been drinking today instead of working? She accused me. I wondered briefly if she was trying to start an argument. Then it came to me that I'd had 3 beers, but Amelia had had a couple herself. There were 5 empty bottles lying around in the trash can. I excused myself by saying I drank a couple this afternoon while I was starting my new project, and then a few more while I was making dinner. She shrugged and sat down to watch TV, not telling me about her day. She usually let me know how things went after the show. After reflecting on it, I realized that she hadn't done that in a long time. Now she hardly ever tells me when she makes a sale. The next day was Wednesday, and she texted again to say she might be a little late. However, she was home before 5 o'clock, which dispelled all my suspicions. On Thursday, she was home early again. Amelia Proudmoore called me at 10:30 on Wednesday morning. Do you have time to talk? She began. I replied that I did. I'm really feeling down and I could use a good cry. Thanks to you and this cell phone tracking program, my suspicions have been confirmed. I know for a fact that Carl is cheating. The investigator said his report won't be ready until Friday, but I know what it will say. On Monday, Carl spent 2 hours at home just after noon, and he never does that. Then went back to work and then went to a restaurant. That part might have been okay since I was supposed to be out of town and he doesn't cook for himself. But yesterday he spent the early afternoon at home again. I bet he entertained his new love in our bed. Can we meet and talk? I'll buy lunch. I agreed, and we met at a sandwich shop far from Carl's brokerage. You have no idea how glad I am that you took the time to meet with me today. Otherwise, I'd probably still be sitting at Brad's house in my nightgown. I quickly pictured her in a nightgown. I was bored out of my mind, said Amelia. I can't do any of the things I usually do. I usually spend a couple hours exploring new houses with Ed, my contractor, or I might go to the gym and work out a little. I don't have any close friends, at least not anyone I can tell about all of this. I realize that most of the people I know are just acquaintances, but not friends I could trust like you. I found it a little odd that she considered me a friend after the few hours we'd spent together. She realized how it sounded. I know that sounds pathetic, but that's exactly how I feel. Most of the people I interact with are just social contacts. Carl likes to socialize and expects me to do the same. He's constantly pushing me to join social committees to get extra publicity. In part, he wants to keep me busy so he can be more involved in decisions regarding the construction of our homes. But he and Ed don't get along. Ed's a damn good general contractor, but he's gay. Brad got him involved in the job. Carl and him give each other a hard time. Carl is constantly trying to tell Ed how to do his job. I'm the buffer. It got to the point where Ed and I made a list of options like carpet styles, countertops, and other features that Carl had to sell. We got about 10 floor plans to choose from, said Amelia. You could see that she enjoyed talking about her business to take her mind off her sadness. She was becoming more and more animated. I sat back and listened. Our architect is a guy Ed knew. You know, of all the men I can talk to, between Ed, Brad, and his partner, Dave, the architect, and Carl, Carl is the only one who isn't gay. And you are now, of course. She gave me an attentive look, and I almost blushed. I think that says something about me, she continued. I feel more comfortable socializing with gay men. They don't hit on me, even in passing. Then she realized what she had said. Oh, I didn't mean it to sound like that. You don't hit on me, and I really appreciate it. I know you look out for me, and I do the same with you. It happens automatically. She blushed. Damn, let me regroup and take my foot out of my mouth, she said. I realized that day that you love your wife deeply and would never mess around with her. In that sense, you really are the Boy Scout that Carl was talking about. But I think it's really good that you have ethics. It makes me trust you even more. I want to make sure you don't get hurt when the bomb goes off. I talked to Brad last night. He and Dave agree that getting rid of Carl will bring home sales back into the company. As developers, we can do that. We'll just let Carl handle that side of things to get around the trust rules and give me some extra legal income. For helping me out and being friends with me, we thought we could bring Sarah on as an employee. She could handle sales for us and your family income wouldn't be affected. That surprised me. It was something I had been worried about. I was earning more than enough to support my family, but we were trying to fund college expenses for our children and invest for eventual retirement. Sarah and I had already accumulated a decent amount of capital, and I hated to think that the extra income might be interrupted. I'm not trying to bribe you to keep my secret, said Amelia. I just want you to know that I value my friends very highly, and I consider you my friend. When I called you this morning, I was still sitting on my ass in my nightgown watching morning talk shows on TV. Well, that's not true. The TV was on, but I was having my own little pity party. The last 2 nights I've been talking to Brad and Dave and helping their kids with their homework. Anything to get my thoughts in order and not be so damn depressed. The kids noticed this and were asking their dads what was going on. I tried to make plans, but really just felt depressed. You really came to my rescue when you agreed to meet and let me put your ear to the ground. I sympathized with her and told her she could call me anytime she needed to talk. The fact that you let me blabber on about all this helps a lot. I hope I meet someone at least half as nice as you when Carl and I go our separate ways. I know it's inevitable. Worst of all, he's put so many doubts in me that even though he's not actively having an affair, I'm not happy with our marriage. That makes me a bitch. And I've always thought of myself as a good person. You know what I mean? I told her I understood. Amelia advised me to be careful not to make too much of a big deal out of it. After talking some more, we parted ways. And I called Amelia the next day at noon to see how she was doing. I was worried about her and thought she might be more depressed than she had admitted the day before. She assured me that she was fine, and she had gone to see a divorce lawyer. She advised me to wait until I had evidence of infidelity before I overreacted. I am unhappily married, but if there is no adultery, then counseling would be an option. Besides, proof of adultery means an easier divorce and property division of 30 to 70% versus 50 to 50%. Brad insisted on drawing up a good prenuptial agreement. When your big brother takes care of you, it's great. I wished her well and got back to business. At 10 o'clock on a Friday morning, I was busily pounding away at my keyboard. I had just finished a video conference call with my team so we could assess our progress. This game will take at least a year to develop before we can even release a beta. Horizon Games had other smaller games in development at the same time that I was also overseeing, but this one was hopefully going to be the one that would bring us to the forefront. If we release the game as planned, it will be a career changer. Not to mention the stock options Horizon offered me to stay with the company every year. I would be financially secure. My team of 4 was on board with this endeavor. We had a good plan. Everyone knew their role. My mood was broken when I heard the doorbell ring. I decided to ignore the bell, figuring it was some salesman trying to take up my time, but when the bell rang again, I sighed and pushed back my chair to see who was there. Amelia Proudmore was standing on my front porch. She had clearly been crying. You could tell by her smeared makeup, which she hadn't bothered to fix before ringing my doorbell. I realized from her tense attitude that she had absolute proof of her husband's infidelity. I wondered if she needed my advice or a shoulder to cry on. From what she'd said 2 days ago, other than her brother and his partner, she didn't trust other people too much in personal matters. We really need to talk, she said grimly. I'm really sorry. I just couldn't bring myself to do it over the phone. You know I've been following Carl all week with my phone. The grim expression on Amelia's face as she followed me into the living room made my stomach churn. I got a sense of foreboding. I told you he went home every day after lunch. The question is, what was he doing at home? Well, and who he was doing it with. The investigator I hired gave me a full report this morning. I did suspect it would turn out to be one of the 2 young women in the office, she offered. Remember the cute girl who sat at the next table from us at the banquet? I nodded. How could I not remember her? I'd seen her a few times in the office when I stopped by to visit Sarah. I didn't know anything else about her, but I was definitely as aware of her as any of the other men in the room. She was there with her brother as an assistant. I immediately suspected it was a front, and Carl decided to put her at another table as a screen. I was wrong. As Amelia told me this, tears welled up in her eyes. Despite her anger, she was more upset and saddened than she had been a couple days ago. I suddenly realized that she needed more than just a shoulder to cry on. Her facial expression told me that this was Carl's girlfriend. Oh, shit, I muttered. Shit. So you've already looked at the video your cameras took? I asked. She nodded. Before I could say anything, my cell phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a call from an unknown number. It was from Jamaica, so I realized it was one of those scam calls. Luckily, the phone tells you who is calling so you don't waste time answering it. I stared at the phone for a few more seconds, and then it hit me. Oh my God, I can't believe I've been so stupid. I jumped up, almost screaming. Amelia leaned back in her chair, surprised by my outburst. What a complete idiot! I stood in shock, angry with myself. What are you talking about? Asked Amelia softly. Calm down and I'll explain. Why are you an idiot? Because it never occurred to me to track her damn phone. Even after I explained the process to you and downloaded that app to your phone. I knew all about these apps because I linked our phones a long time ago. I did it to test the kids. Well, maybe you didn't check because you didn't suspect Sarah might be cheating, Amelia suggested. Suggested Amelia. Suggested Amelia. Or deep in your subconscious, you just didn't want to know. Don't blame yourself for trusting your wife. Until our conversation on Monday, I hadn't even considered the possibility of her cheating, but I should have considered tracking her cell phone as well. Being a gamer means you look for breadcrumbs to follow. You look for subtle hints. I failed. We would have known who it was right away if I'd only looked. I've wasted a week. Well, now we know who we're dealing with. I've got the videotapes. How many do you want to watch? She asked softly. I've been watching them since I got the report. Most of it I had to fast forward through. I just stopped when it looked like they were talking. I nodded. A sudden lump in my throat threatened to choke me. Tears came to my eyes. Every week this week he's been bringing Sarah to our house, said Amelia, now holding my hand. They have fun and then they leave. Yesterday, they got in our hot tub for a little while. That was the last video I watched. Do you want to watch it? I shook my head and said not yet. I need a few minutes. I stood up and almost tripped. Amelia reached out to catch me, but I regained my balance and raised my hand to wave her off. Stumbling, I walked out of the room. Suddenly, I could barely see. Tears filled my eyes. I didn't want to pass out in front of Amelia. Walking into the bathroom, I stared at myself in the mirror. My face was purple. I felt nauseous. I had already decided that if she cheated, divorce was inevitable. What I was feeling now was much more intense. The difference between my imagination and what I was experiencing now was like waiting for the death of a loved one who was terminally ill and on life support, but still held a glimmer of hope for a miracle. And that's compared to what I experienced when the person died. Those two things can't be compared. I went through it when I lost my mother. I splashed cool water on my face. I knew I would experience this feeling many more times in the near future, but right now, anger was my primary emotion. I wanted answers. I wanted to know why Sarah had done what she knew would rip my heart out. Her complete disregard for me and our family was pissing me off. I wiped my face and walked back into the living room. I'm sorry. I lost it, I said to Amelia. Thought about how I might feel, and then reality. I blanched. And then thought I was so blinded I couldn't think clearly. It just finished me off. I understand you completely. I went through the same thing earlier in the week, watching that phone tracker, said Amelia quietly. You were right there with me. Let me know when you're ready. Tell me how much you want to know and when. Everything, I said simply. I regained control of myself. I want to see everything you have. Then I want to decide the best course of action. I want to nail both their cheating asses to the wall. I added. Good. That's where I want to start. She opened the laptop she'd brought with her. She put the video down to the part she wanted and clicked the play icon where she cheated on me. Amelia stopped the video. I'll let you make copies of all the footage. I've watched this scene 3 times now. Each time it pisses me off more and more. That asshole was laughing at something that would hurt me, she growled. Please don't reveal some of those shameful things you see in me if you decide to divorce your wife. If, I exclaimed, nearly at a loss for words. It's already a foregone conclusion. What are you going to do? I'm going to burn that son of a bitch to the ground, declared Amelia. I'll take everything, even if I get hurt in the process. Screw him. I'll hit him where it will hurt him the most. I'll take his money, and then I'll hurt his ego. We both need to talk to Brad. He knows where to start. Brad told us he has only the most general idea of how to proceed in a divorce. But he has ideas on how to ruin Carl's life and even Sarah's if I want to go down that road. He's already invited a friend of his to take over Amelia's case. It was the lawyer she met yesterday. I told them I wanted to use the same lawyer. After Brad called, his friend cleared her schedule and told us to come over. Brad went with us to offer his experience with contracts. By the end of the day, I had spent almost all of the money Sarah and I had saved. I had fully funded college trusts for each of the kids. Our shared credit cards were paid off and canceled. I had set up a separate card account for myself and was expecting a new card on Monday. There was less than $10,000 left between the savings and checking accounts. I took half of it and opened an account in my name only. We still had an investment account left, but that was easy to fix. Our broker split it up. It was obvious that he had been down this road many times before. Brad asked some pointed questions about my job and how I get paid. I replied that by direct deposit. He chuckled and called me a smartass, but said he was glad I still had a sense of humor. He wanted to know how my paycheck was calculated. Am I an independent contractor or an employee? I replied that I was salaried, but I was supposed to be offered stock options, but I hadn't exercised any of them yet. Sarah didn't want to part with the money to exercise the options. Brad shook his head and said, "I'm missing a great opportunity. I would get more shares if my next project went as well as we all hoped." He told me to let him read the contracts, and certainly not to sign anything without his advice. I agreed. My last act before parting was to copy all the videos onto a couple thumb drives and make duplicates. As I drove home, I pondered when I should bring the hammer down on Sarah. Screw it, I decided. I called my 2 kids who were in college and asked them to come home as soon as possible. I told both of them it was important, but not urgent. They lived in dorms at a university about 50 miles away. My son called me back and assured me that he would take them and his sister first thing in the morning. Sam and I were about to order pizza when Tina and Greg arrived. They didn't want to wait until morning to make the short trip home. They were understandably concerned. They assumed that either Sarah or I had been diagnosed with COVID. I didn't even hint at the real reason. Sarah once again sent a text saying she would be late for work. I knew exactly what kind of work she was doing. It amused me a little that she showed up about an hour after Tina and Greg. Apparently they had called her to tell her that I had called them at home. I barely restrained myself from asking her if she'd taken the extra time to spritz and shower. "What's going on, Ty?" demanded Sarah. "Are you sick or something?" Her concern was touching, or might have been if I hadn't known it was insincere. Perhaps she was worried that my physical condition might affect her income. I told her that the plot would unfold in due course. Not in those words, of course. In fact, I said, I'll explain everything in a little while. I decided to make a grand statement. I was pissed off and wanted my statement to be epic, like one of my video games. I knew I wasn't up to the task, but I had to go for it anyway. I'm going to get a new bottle of Gentleman Jack, a premium whiskey. If you want anything else, get it now. All 3 kids, ranging in age from 18 to 20, looked at me with awe and concern. Sarah was simply stunned. I had never allowed myself to do this before. On my tray were 5 small glasses. I poured a measure of whiskey into each glass. My glass, I raised it up. Here's to the past and everything in our family, and to the future, whatever it holds for us all. I proclaimed and took a big gulp of the liquor. It burned me and tears came to my eyes. The whiskey wasn't the only reason for my tears. I had mentally rehearsed this all day, but I could still feel the emotions flooding in. The second sip was justified. I watched as the kids took a sip each and then gulped down the first drink I offered them. Sarah looked concerned, but said nothing as she drank. I knew her well. She was ready to snap. "I've gathered you all together today to make an important announcement," I said. I took a deep breath and proclaimed, "Your mother and I are getting a divorce." All hell broke loose. All the kids were stunned and quickly looked amongst themselves, as well as Sarah and me. I stood, much calmer than I thought I was, and watched them. Sarah's eyes widened and she screamed, "What the hell are you talking about? We're not getting a divorce." None of our children uttered a word. I knew they were shocked into silence. "What did you expect when you decided to cheat on me?" I said, almost at a loss for words again. She looked like she was going to deny everything when I raised my left hand, showing the flash drive I held in my fingertips. "Do you want me to stick it in the TV and show you the video? There's no telling how long you've been disrespecting me and your family." I stared at her, my absolute rage evident. Perhaps it was only because there were children sitting there that I didn't use physical force. Sarah paused for a couple seconds and, sobbing, ran out of the room towards the bedroom we once shared. "Really, Dad?" asked Greg, my oldest. "You have proof on the video?" I nodded. "It's pretty bad." I set the flash drive down on the coffee table. "I'm going to be gone for a couple hours. You can watch the videos together if you want, or make copies and watch them yourself. I'll leave it up to you to help your mother pack. Or, if she refuses to leave, pack my clothes and I'll leave. But I'm not going to sleep under the same roof with her anymore. You know I need everything in my office, so keep it safe and sound, okay? Protect it." They nodded, still in shock. I went to a local bar and started drinking. I called Amelia and told her what I had done. She asked where I was. 30 minutes later, she showed up. "Shit. You work fast. Did you mention me when you ran into Sarah?" I shook my head. "Good. As far as Carl knows, I'm still with my mother. He called me the other day to ask how she was doing. I think he was fishing. I told him she tested negative for COVID and is feeling better, but I'm going to stay until next week." I kept drinking until I forgot where I was and who I was with. I woke up in my hotel room and staggered to the bathroom. I didn't throw up, but it was close. My head was throbbing. I poured cool water into the sink and washed my face until I couldn't think straight. For a few minutes, I wondered if I was still drunk. I had no idea how I had gotten there. Finally, I returned to the main room and found Amelia there wearing a t-shirt. My t-shirt. "I caught a cab and brought us to this hotel. I couldn't leave you alone," she said. "I've had too much to drink too, but not as much as you. I'm surprised you managed not to get sick." "We didn't do anything, did we?" I asked uncertainly. "Are you kidding?" replied Amelia with a smile. "As much alcohol as you drank, no man could have done. We haven't even slept in the same bed. I'll admit I wanted to cuddle. I certainly wouldn't mind a hug." The coffee had already brewed and she poured us each a cup. She sipped the coffee from her cup. "We need to get cleaned up," she said. "I've had a whole week to figure out what's going on, and you haven't had a day." Finding out that Sarah was the one Carl was having fun with took me by surprise, too. I really thought the Barbie doll was her. The caffeine had the desired effect on my brain and brought me to my senses. I drank enough alcohol day in and day out that I had a good tolerance, and I usually didn't experience a bad hangover. But this time was a little different. "Thank you for taking care of me," I said. "I burned my whole world down. I hope my kids don't hate me." "Not your whole world. Brad and I will help you." "You helped me," said Amelia. "And your kids will be okay. They were worried about you. They kept texting and I answered them. I take it Sam, Tina, and Greg are your kids?" I nodded. I picked up my cell phone. I got several messages from all three kids asking where I was and if I was okay. I read my response, Amelia's response. Drank too much alcohol. Taking an Uber to the hotel. A few messages came from Sarah as well. Most begged me to come home so we could talk. Yeah, like I was in the mood for that right now. Maybe I would later. Her last message read, "You son of a bitch. You had to let the kids watch that video?" I wanted to show that message to Amelia. She turned around with a bottle of ibuprofen and shook out 4 pills into my hand. She swallowed a few too. Then she offered us some refreshment and told us there was a small restaurant next door. Then, without even turning around, She took off her shirt and held it out to me. I thought my eyes were about to pop out of my head. She calmly walked over to another chair where her own clothes were stacked and put on her bra. I shook my head to clear my head and got dressed. I saw a sign in the bathroom with free toiletries in the office, she said. Why don't you run downstairs and get us some toothbrushes and toothpaste while I finish getting ready? When I returned, she was already brushing her hair. She had already applied some makeup. At Amelia's insistence, I called my oldest, Greg. I told him where I was and that after I ate, I would call a cab to pick up my car and then come home. I asked if Sarah was still there. He replied that she had just left, but wouldn't say where she was going. Apparently, he didn't like my plans because just as Amelia and I were ordering breakfast, he walked through the door, followed by Tina and Sam. I waved my hand. All three of them frowned when they saw that I wasn't alone. They clearly didn't approve of me having breakfast with a woman who wasn't their mother, and a beautiful one at that. I could almost read their minds. I picked up a woman and took her to a hotel. I almost laughed. Hey guys, I want you to meet Amelia Proudmore. I said it before either of them could utter a word. I could see that Tina was ready to fire both barrels at me. Amelia, these are my kids, Greg, Tina, and Sam. Amelia is the wife of that guy your mother is having an affair with. The scowls disappeared. They sat down at the table and I called for the waitress so they could eat with us. So, I assume you didn't just tell her? Tina asked. I mean, you don't seem very upset, she turned to Amelia. I've had a few days to get over it. Your dad just found out yesterday that your mom is the woman. We've been in contact all week, Amelia explained. I had to confide in him when he found out I was out of town. We explained how this all happened. So your husband doesn't know you're in the know, stated Tina. Amelia shook her head. Not yet, no. As of last night, he thinks I'm 3 states away from him. I bet he's shitting his pants right now, worried that I'll find out once I get back to town and your father tells me. The first chance I get, I'll file for divorce, just like your dad did. I know. Sam, Tina and I looked at what you have on your flash drive, said Greg sadly. We all agreed that there was no way you were going to let what she did go unchallenged. What we saw can't be forgiven and forgotten. But we're going to have to be careful. We're furious. But at the same time, she's still our mom. I told him that I had planned to talk to them about it later, and I was glad they had already come to that conclusion. You said your mom left earlier, I said, shuddering. Tina said they heard Sarah in the kitchen, but she didn't try to talk to either of them before she left. I pulled out my phone and opened the Find a Phone app. Is this your address? I asked Amelia. She frowned and nodded. They're getting together now. Judging by the time she left, she's been there for over an hour. That's too long to just tell him it's over and make some contingency plans. The kids had forgotten about the Find Your Phone app I insisted on installing on all of our phones. I wanted us to be connected to each other in case of an emergency. Now I feel dumb. Greg smiled sourly. We took turns trying to call and text you last night. We were worried when you didn't answer. I could have just checked my phone to find you. Amelia pulled out her phone and called. She asked a few questions and I realized she was talking to the investigator she had hired. The cameras and listening devices are still working. We'll be able to find out what they're doing and saying later. The investigator will be in his office until noon and is going to give me a receiver to listen to. I hope they haven't figured out where they were filmed yet and found the cameras. Has Sarah watched the video? She asked. Tina said they rewound the video to fast forward through some of the explicit moments. One day, Sarah came out of her room, and Tina paused the video just at that moment. She came in to ask if she could talk. She looked at the TV and squealed a little when she saw herself on the screen, said Tina with a chuckle. She ran out of the room and went back to her bedroom. Greg and Sam said that part was pretty funny. We were going to copy the flash drive and watch it ourselves, but your office is locked, said Sam. When did you have time to put a deadbolt and locking handle on it? I told him yesterday when I got home. I didn't want to risk Sarah trashing my office. I'd hate for her to get arrested for breaking and entering and vandalism on top of everything else, I said. It's our house, so supposedly she can go wherever she wants. But it's my office, and a lot of the equipment technically belongs to Horizon Games. Amelia started giggling. Keep the phone finder app open and keep your voice down. We all looked at her puzzled. She pressed a button on her phone. Hey, sweetie, are you home? Good. I changed my mind about staying with my mom. I told you she tested negative for COVID last night and she's feeling much better, but she's still a little woozy. She wants to be left alone while she recovers. So I caught an early flight. We had already landed and I took an Uber ride home. I didn't want to call and wake you up if you were still asleep. I'm almost there. I'll be home in a few minutes. I missed you. Amelia hung up the phone and grinned. Let's see how long it takes Sarah to escape. Let's time it. Wow, you're amazing. I never would have thought of that, said Tina. And I love it. I can just imagine how Mom will be thrashing around to get out of there. It took Sarah almost 10 minutes to get out. Oh, Tina said. That's not good. You interrupted something. It doesn't take 10 minutes to grab your purse and run out the door. We'll know what they were doing and saying as soon as we get the phone from the investigator, said Amelia. Looks like I'll be at my brother's house for a few more days and won't be going home like I planned. Well, I could, I guess. I could just call Carl and tell him I know, but I really want to meet him in person. And I want to pick up the rental car and use my own. Do you think he might get aggressive? Asked Greg. We can all go with you if you want, he added. She said her brother and his partner would be enough. Dad, are you sure your car will still be parked at the bar where you left it? What if it gets towed? Asked Sam. I explained that a lot of people give themselves a ride home when they've had a few too many drinks, so cars in the parking lot overnight is quite normal. In fact, you can tell a good bar by the number of cars in the parking lot in the morning, I said. You know it's popular, and that's another lesson for you when you're old enough to go to a bar. Never hesitate to call someone over if you're not sober. Part 2. We all piled into Greg's car. We stopped by the investigator's office first, since it was down the road. Amelia explained to the kids that the cameras and listening devices were tiny and activated by sound or movement. They transmitted the signal to a hidden receiver that used her home modem to access the internet. A second receiver picked up the signal so it could be intercepted on her phone or computer. I suppose video stored in the cloud can be transmitted directly to any computer if you have the right address and security codes. I offered the kids a ride home when they dropped Amelia and I off at the bar to pick up our cars. They declined. No, Daddy, we want to watch the show, said Sam. Then he quickly corrected himself. I mean, we want to see how they reacted to Amelia calling Carl. The other two agreed. I agreed, and we followed Amelia to her brother's house. Brad sent his two kids outside when he found out what Amelia had done. They grumbled a little at first, but then complied. I decided to sweeten their pot a little and told them I had a huge collection of video games and they could come to my house with their Aunt Amelia later and pick out what they wanted to play. They almost jumped out the door. See? It doesn't take much time to get out of the house if you have a good incentive, said Tina, grinning. We connected the receiver to Brad's TV with a USB cable. I used the remote control to enter the necessary codes. I had all the information I needed to access it and then save it to my computer. I fast-forwarded the video to Carl, running around the house in just his underwear and drinking coffee as usual. I slowed down to normal speed when Sarah appeared. I can't believe Ty has a video of us. How the hell did he get it? You said he didn't suspect anything. He must be, or do you think he got it from someone else? Asked Carl. Sarah shrugged and said, I hadn't given her the slightest hint that I had the slightest suspicion. We made love on Tuesday night. I'm sure he didn't know at the time. I don't think he's that good an actor. Somebody must have told him, and he must have had a reason for getting involved. You don't think it was Amelia, do you? Asked Sarah. Absolutely not, replied Carl. She would never have gone out of town to visit her mother if she knew about us. She would have confronted me immediately and made my life a living hell. No, it must be someone else who has a grudge against me. Maybe Ed, the general contractor. He hates me, and I think he'd tell Amelia in a heartbeat, unless he wants to blackmail me. He knows you, and probably went to your husband first, just to mess with us, or to someone in the office who's jealous of you. But I'm afraid Ty might go and tell Amelia as soon as he can. I doubt he knows how to contact her, and he'll have to wait for her to come back. Maybe I can bribe Ty to keep his mouth shut about who you're seeing. Sarah snorted derisively. Seriously, I know it won't stop him from divorcing you, said Carl. But maybe if I offer him $10,000 a month, he'll keep Amelia at bay. Can you hide that kind of money? Doesn't Amelia know about all our sales? Said Sarah. I thought you said she sometimes looks at the brokerage firm's financial statements. Yeah, she can be nosy sometimes, but maybe I can come up with a fictitious payee for a few commissions. And then transfer the money to Ty, pondered Carl. Before, stealing the money wasn't worth the risk to my broker's license, but now I'm desperate. It's life or death. If we can get Ty to work at all, and 10 grand a month won't last long. Once I get him on the hook, I'll have proof he's a tax evader. I can reduce his bribe. I doubt he'll risk going to jail or losing whatever money he has left after your divorce because of back taxes and penalties, or I could make it look like he's extorting money from me. What a piece of shit, shouted I. Bribes me and then plans to blackmail me. Amelia and Brad shut me up. But we still don't know who got the video of us in the first place, said Sarah. That's a problem. We'll make the same deal with whoever it is that we made with Ty, said Carl. And we'll make it a package deal, so that if either of them backs out, neither of them gets any money. That way, one of them will help us convince the other to agree. Dangerous game, warned Sarah. But I'll really need this job after Ty divorces me. If he claims adultery, I might not get alimony. I don't know how the law works, but that's a big risk for me. Carl assured Sarah that her job wasn't in jeopardy as long as he could do something about it. This brings us back to the question of who made the video in the first place, said Carl. You didn't see where the video was taken? I only caught a glimpse of the TV, said Sarah. I was so embarrassed I couldn't look them in the eye. I didn't look to see what was hanging on the wall or what bed we were lying in. I just walked out of there. This morning I couldn't even look them in the eye. Sooner or later I'm going to have to do it. Do you think it will be in the apartment or here? We've only done it in a hotel room a few times. You were always afraid of leaving a paper trail. We also don't know when it was done. I think it has to be an apartment, said Carl. But I have no idea how he or she found out about it. I'm renting it in the company's name. That means probably someone in the firm or the accountant. Somehow someone spotted it in the accounting or followed us. I really don't think anyone could break in here to install a camera. I mean, an intruder could pick the lock, but only Amelia and I know the security code. Which brings us back to the fact that it can't be Amelia, or she'd already be after my balls and not leaving town. Hey, since Ty knows anyway, why don't we go to the bedroom? Suggested Carl. Are you kidding me? Exclaimed Sarah. My marriage fell apart and you want to have fun. No way. If you do without it, it won't help you, suggested Carl. I heard the timbre of his voice change. It might even take the pressure off and allow you to come up with new options. Something we've missed. I'm not going home like this, declared Sarah. Even if Ty isn't there, one of the kids might overhear. I'll be embarrassed enough talking to them as it is. No one will find out. Come on. Asshole, said Sarah, but immediately giggled. You're incorrigible. They headed for the bedroom. I looked at my kids. I don't think you should watch this part, said I. They looked at me like I'd grown a second head. Are you kidding, Dad? Asked Greg. That ship has already sailed. Carl's cell phone rang on the nightstand. What the hell? He muttered. With one hand, he reached for the phone. Oh shit, it's Amelia. What bad timing. I thought to myself, it was really bad timing. Hi, how are you? Said Carl, smiling broadly. Yeah, good. What, are you almost home? Carl hung up the phone. Hurry up! That bitch is almost home. She decided to fly in without calling. Now he was in a complete panic. There was nothing I could do about it. At that moment, I realized that I was done with this cheating whore. I might think about it later and get depressed, but right now I was amused to watch them fiddling. You have to get out of here. Get dressed, insisted Carl. I have to wash up first, declared Sarah. She ran to the bathroom and we heard the water running. Oh shit, I need to change. When you're dressed, go down the hall and get some fresh sheets. We've got to remake this bed. I have to get out of here, declared Sarah and ran down the hall. Carl was kicking his discarded clothes under the bed. Oh shit. You have to take them with you and I'll spray the place with cologne. Take my clothes too. Take them and wrap them in sheets, ordered Sarah. She started to make the bed. She stopped Carl, who was doing as she ordered, to help her make the bed. Finally, the bed was made. Give me the car keys. I'll put them in your trunk. I can't drive them home. My kids are around and I'm not going to take any chances. Carl grumbled but obeyed. Get out the back door so she can't see you, ordered Carl. My car is in your driveway, said Sarah. That won't help? Carl started spraying the bedroom with something. Oh my God, laughed Amelia. Look how much of that stuff he's spraying around. It looks like his cologne, but it's hard to tell. It better not be my good perfume. I bet this room smells like a French brothel. Brad laughed out loud too. How do you know what a French brothel smells like, sis? He teased. Amelia raised her middle finger in his direction. Sam, Tina, and Greg laughed loudly. I wasn't sure what amused them more, the jokes in the room or the show on TV. Sarah rushed into the house to get her purse. Finally, Sarah was on the doorstep, and Carl, breathing heavily, collapsed into a chair. The video continued because of his movements, but we stopped watching. I'm surprised he didn't call me to find out why I wasn't home, Amelia said. I wonder if the horse's ass had a heart attack. But I wasn't so lucky. Brad called his kids to come back into the house. I repeated my promise to let them play whatever games they wanted. I told them that Sam knew all about games and would help them pick out the good ones. Sam, as befits a soldier, agreed. Amelia wanted to talk privately. Ty, I have to say this. It didn't just hurt me to watch this, and I haven't been lonely and depressed all week. But I'm starting to have feelings for you. Don't say anything. I know it's too soon. Just remember me when you feel it's time to move on. Okay? I nodded. I was attracted to her like any normal man would be. But like she said, it was too early to make plans or even fantasize. For now, I need us to work together, added Amelia. Amelia's phone rang. It was Carl. Oh, I'm sorry I didn't call you. Brad called me right after I hung up the phone. He wanted to talk about Mom, so I asked the driver to bring me here. He and Dave are grilling, so I'll have lunch with them and come home this afternoon. Unless you want to come here? Okay, no problem. She hung up the phone and grinned. I knew he'd decline the invitation. Brad muttered something to himself about not letting Carl anywhere near his house. Dave took me aside and warned me to record any conversation Carl had with me, especially about the bribe. In this state, if either party to a recorded conversation gives permission, it can be admissible in court. There are different legal rules when using video and recordings from the devices Amelia set up. It's her home, so she can do it. And that information can be used to prove adultery in a divorce, but it's not the same in criminal court. I doubt it will come to that, but the Real Estate Ethics Board might get a call if you know what I mean. I told him I had no intention of talking to Carl. I needed a shower, so I said goodbye to them, picked up the kids, and headed home. Tina decided to go with me, and Sam accompanied Greg. Tina asked me what I wanted to do next. I asked her to call Sam, and we put both phones on speakerphone so we could talk together. I told them that I really wanted their mother out of the house as soon as possible. I needed to work, and since my office was in the house, I intended to stay there. Don't mention what you know about the apartment if your mother claims she has nowhere to go. And of course, don't say anything about where we were or who you met. You can tell her that I'm going to talk to a lawyer on Monday about getting an injunction against her evicting her from the premises on the grounds that it's my workplace. You can even assume that the neighbors will know what's going on, and she'll want to avoid embarrassment. They agreed to give it a try. Tina turned to me and said, Dad, Amelia is a very cool woman. I like her, but I want to remind you to take your time and not get involved in any ventures. I tried to counter that it had only been a day since I found out that Sarah was cheating on me, and I had no intentions of getting involved with another woman. Tina continued, Well, she's partial to you, I can tell. She needs to rely on you, and you could use her support too. We know you spent the night together at the hotel. Both your cars were parked in the parking lot of the bar. We guessed you had a drink together and then drove to the hotel. I confirmed that Amelia had met me at the bar and took care of me when I was drunk out of my mind. I didn't go into details but told Tina that we had separate beds. Yeah, that's what I thought. But you wouldn't go to a bar to court the husband of a woman cheating with your spouse and then stay at a hotel instead of going home. Only if you have no feelings other than friendship. Besides, she took you home to introduce you to her family. I told her not to read too much into that. Tina scoffed. When we got home, Sarah was in the kitchen. I ignored her and headed into the bedroom to change. I heard Sarah asking the kids where they were. We picked Daddy up from the hotel he was staying at last night and had breakfast with him before we took him to get the car, replied Tina. Smart girl. Tell the truth, but not in too much detail. We need to talk, Mom, continued Tina. After I closed the bathroom door, I didn't hear anything else. I took my time getting dressed and felt almost normal, at least physically. The kids still loved and respected me, even if my whole family was no longer whole. I was able to move on with my life. Of course, I was saddened and depressed. Sarah's infidelity was a betrayal I could never forgive. I knew I really needed to hear what she wanted to tell me. But I saw how easily she had let Carl seduce her this morning, just hours after yesterday's shock. A surge of anger swept over me. I wasn't ready to listen to her ramblings. Sarah was waiting for me. I brushed her off, telling her I wasn't ready to listen to anything she had to say. I understand. I took a couple changes of clothes and some personal items. The kids put them in my car. I'll find a place to stay for a while and come back later in the week for my stuff. She paused. Carl wants to talk to you about not telling his wife about our, affairs. I wondered if it would be mentioned or if they'd change their minds. I was ready, but I still almost lost my temper. Why the hell shouldn't I? I frowned. Why should I give a damn about that bastard's marriage? He had no respect for mine. Neither do you. She had the decency to blush, but she continued. Ty, it's financially important that she remain in the dark for now. Both for him and for us, she said. He's willing to pay you to keep quiet. I managed to look as incredulous as I felt at her audacity. I was almost at a loss for words, but I said, Pay me? He wants to bribe me not to destroy his marriage while he destroys mine with my wife? How much are you worth to him? Then I paused. I'll listen to the asshole, but only under certain conditions. She looked relieved. I want him in plain sight, and I want one of the kids to videotape our conversation. I'm not sure he'll agree to that, but he mentioned $10,000, she said, watching my face closely. I snorted derisively. She added, A month? He's on his way here now. He'll call when he pulls up, and I'll have to tell him what to do next. I'll mention the video, but I think it will be a deal breaker. I told her the video was out of the question. I didn't want him to be able to claim later that I threatened him or that I offered to keep quiet if he paid me. If he wants me to give up an ounce of my integrity, it's going to cost him. Sarah nodded and turned away in relief. I walked into my office and closed the door. I called Amelia on the phone. She put me through to Dave. Dave advised me to be very careful with the wording. He gave me some suggestions. I was already thinking about the things he mentioned. He handed the phone back to Amelia. As soon as he and Sarah leave, call me. Carl and Sarah were talking a while ago. I need you to hear him. I'll meet with you. Brad will follow me to the airport to return my rental car and take me home. Tina knocked on my office door to let me know Carl was out front. He and Mom are talking. She sent me to get you. What's going on? I quickly told her. Was he seriously trying to pay you back? What a moron, she exclaimed. I warned her for her expressions, but recognized that they accurately described the man. I gave her instructions. I also set my phone to record sound, and then we walked out the front door. As we approached each other, we resembled two gunslingers from old Western movies. Sarah had her phone out as well and was videotaping what was happening. We stopped at least 8 feet apart. Thanks for meeting me, Ty, Carl began. I'm really sorry for the way things turned out. Don't try to trick me, asshole, I growled. You're only sorry for what I found out. You don't care about my feelings or my marriage. So get on with what you came here to offer and skip all that shit. He flinched, but his smile didn't falter. His image of a salesman was working overtime. I kept my hands open and relaxed. I didn't want it to seem like I was threatening him in any way. I can't let Amelia find out about Sarah and I, he said simply. That would be very bad for me. I started to chuckle, and he quickly continued. I'm willing to pay you to help keep her in the dark. How much do you want for your silence? I didn't say a word. He waited a few moments, expecting my answer, but there was no answer. Finally, he said, I told Sarah that I would give you $10,000 a month in cash, of course. What do you say? I chose my words carefully. I'll let you give the money to my children. I'll consider it compensation for you destroying their family. Sarah sighed and started to say something, but then held back. Do you have that amount of money with you? Carl replied, No, it's Saturday. The banks are closed, but I will deliver it to you on Monday. You have my word on that. I need you to promise that Amelia won't find out if I pay you $10,000 a month. Carl smiled. First of all, neither my children nor I will let Amelia know that you are cheating on her with my whore wife. Sarah immediately started protesting my words. Carl waved her off. Secondly, why should I take your word for it? I can't trust that you will stay away from Sarah and not mess up my marriage. No deal. Carl grinned, but then caught himself. I can write you a check, he said weakly. You can hold it as collateral. I'll get the money and exchange it for you. I only have my checkbook with me for our joint checking account, so you have to let me collect. Or Amelia will see the trade. I shrugged and told him to write on the memo line that the check was reimbursement for Saturn's children, and double the amount if he wanted me to accept the check. I thought he was going to lose his temper. He turned purple and roared. He took a step forward and caught himself looking directly at the phone in Tina's hand. You son of a bitch. He was so angry he'd forgotten what he'd meant to say. Fine, I'll pay you $50,000 this month and 10 after if you keep your mouth shut. She won't find out anything, but you must give me until Wednesday to get the money. What she finds out is not my problem. I'll just repeat my promise. I will not tell Amelia that you're changing her, and neither will my children. If she finds out any other way, so be it. It's her problem, I said. And I want it to be perfectly clear that I don't consider this a bribe. You are the one offering my children reparations for screwing up their family. Say so. Carl looked down at his feet. He knew he'd lost control of the deal, and he didn't like it one bit. Fine. Then he repeated everything, including that he was the one offering to make amends. He went to his car to get his checkbook. He tried to hold it out to me, but I stepped back and pointed at Tina. I wanted to make sure there was no way he could come within arm's length of me. Tina showed me the check. It was written exactly as I'd asked. She slipped it into her jeans pocket. Oh, and I want you to know this. If you don't redeem this check in cash by Wednesday, I'm taking it to the bank, I said. And if it doesn't go through for any reason, I'm going to charge you with writing me a bad check. Carl strode to his car and drove off. Sarah looked like she wanted to say something, but remained silent. She put her phone away. I nodded to Tina to stop the recording. I think you might want to follow your boyfriend, I suggested. She shook her head. He needs to go home. Amelia will be back soon. I need to find a place to stay. Carl forgot to ask, who gave you the video? I shook my head and didn't say a word. She walked to her car and drove off. Sam and Greg were watching from the front door. I walked past them to make copies of the newest video. Wow, $15,000, said Greg. Do you think we can keep it? I replied that I didn't know. I would have to discuss the idea with my new lawyer friends, Brad and Dave. The money wasn't important, I said. What was important was hurting his ego. I called Amelia to tell her about my meeting with Carl. She asked if they could stop by the house. I watched the videotape from the house, said Amelia. It's disturbing. I'd like you to watch it. I told her to come over. I think we want Dave to be with us, but he and Brad don't want to leave the kids alone for too long. I mean, they're old enough to stay on their own, but we don't know for how long. Take them with you, I said. I made them a promise. Then I went to find Tina and Sam. They said they would keep Brad's kids busy with video games. I took Greg aside. I have no idea how long I'll be here. Do you have that credit card I gave you to use only in case of emergency? He nodded. Okay, let's call it an emergency. Use it to order takeout if I'm going to be late. Unless you guys want to cook. He frowned at the thought. When he first started college, I had set up a credit card account with a small limit and gave him the card to use if he needed emergency funds, like a flat tire. He knew that didn't mean he could have parties or go on dates on my dime. Tina had gotten a card for the same account at the beginning of freshman year. Neither of them had any need to use the card. Every once in a while, I would call and ask them to go out to dinner together on my dime to keep the account active. This was also done to keep them in touch with each other while they were studying. Family unity was important to me. Until yesterday, I thought it was important to Sarah as well. I shook off my melancholy and sat down to wait for Amelia. When they arrived, I ushered them into my office. I told the kids that they could take the office when we were done with business. I went in first and turned on the videotape of my meeting with Carl. Looks like you made $15,000, or at least your kids did, at least at first glance, announced Dave. Brad nodded. Amelia told me she left enough money in their former joint accounts for him to cover that amount. Amelia agreed, smiling. But you didn't leave him a large reserve. To hell with him. I doubt he'll discover his credit card has been canceled either. He'll find out soon enough. You really nailed him. He hates to lose in a negotiation. I can tell by the way he's boarding that he's seriously pissed off, said Amelia solemnly. I'm not going to stay in the house until he leaves and until I change the lock codes and security alarms. To my perplexed look, she replied, Wait until you see the new video. She opened her laptop and pressed a few keys. Carl appeared on the screen. He was sitting in his living room talking on the phone. We could only hear his side of the conversation. So he just got home. Good. I need to talk to him. No, you can give him an idea, but let me deal with him. I'll head in that direction. If he refuses to talk, I'll just keep going. But I really want to get this over with, and as soon as possible. Of course you can use the apartment. You have the key. You'll have to act on your own. I don't think I'll be able to make it, but I may be able to get away. Oh, yes. I can tell you that I have plans for Miss Bitch Amelia. I'm furious. She calls me and tells me she's almost home and then nothing. I find out later that she went to her brother's house instead. I teach her a lesson for disrespecting me like that. Of course, I can't say it out loud, but I'll know. She won't say no to me. Ha! I know I can get her through this. He started laughing. What a son of a bitch! I exclaimed. Hell no, never again, replied Amelia. What worries me is that he could translate his anger into physical force, especially after you went off on him. He'll want revenge, and if I become his target then... She didn't say the rest. I was seriously upset. I looked at Dave and Brad and they were furious. Don't worry, said Brad with a cold, deadly expression on his face. That asshole isn't going to hurt her. I'm just trying to figure out the best way to let him bury himself. Recording his conversation is one thing, but then he can claim it was just his fantasies. He had thoughts, but he wasn't going to act on them. He can get away with it with a good defense. I want it to be ironclad if he makes a single move. Looking at that athletic build, I realized I didn't want to get on the bad side of his anger. Maybe some martial arts expert could handle it, or a Navy SEAL with a gun, but not your average guy off the street. Dave was almost as muscular and at least as upset about the way Carl had threatened his sister-in-law. I couldn't help myself. I started laughing. They both looked at me curiously. I'm sorry. I was just mentally picturing Carl between the two of you. He was quite agitated during my confrontation today, and it was completely verbal. They grinned back. You shouldn't mess with the family, said Brad ominously. So you're in? He asked. I had only one answer to that question. You betcha. What's the plan? Dave said, We don't want to risk Amelia staying there. We'll drop her off and let her go into the house to get her clothes and toiletries. Then she'll put them in the car and drive away. She'll stay with us until she gets a subpoena. We'll be there in case he gets aggressive. We'll be monitoring her via video link. That's it? Why don't you go with her and help her carry her stuff out? I asked. We can't. He told us in front of witnesses that we were not allowed on the property. He filed a report on him, Brad said. I punched him in the face once when I heard him call me names. As lawyers, we can't say we didn't understand the law. If we had gone into the house, he could have called 911 and arrested us. I thought it was a stupid law that Amelia couldn't invite them into the house to help her get her stuff, especially under those circumstances. Dave assured me they thought so too, but couldn't afford an arrest. He might claim we're intimidating him by our very presence. We'd better comply. And after your last meeting, it's better if you stay outside too. We left my office and I told Sam and Tina to take Brad's kids inside and have some fun. Behave yourselves, said Dave. We don't know when we'll be back. You're in good hands, okay? Both teens immediately assured him they knew how to behave. He smiled and kissed each one on the cheek. Brad did the same. You could see they had a good family. I was a little amused that Brad couldn't even pull into the driveway. Property is property. And then there's the neighborhood security cameras. Dave and I settled into the back seat while Amelia got out of the car at the curb. We drove away. We actually drove a block and parked right outside the house. Brad turned off the ignition. We set up the laptop so we could watch the live broadcast. Amelia entered the house through the front door, making sure it was unlocked. Brad said he had a key just in case. We didn't see Carl. I wasn't even sure he was in the house. Amelia walked to her bedroom, then went into the bathroom and closed the door. After a few seconds, the camera turned off. The camera in the living room turned on. Carl was either in the kitchen or the garage. He walked through the house. Amelia came out of the bathroom and stopped when she saw Carl. What are you doing? She asked. Come on, baby, it's been almost 2 weeks. Carl said in what I realized was his seductive salesman voice. Not interested, said Amelia, and walked over to the closet looking for her bag. I'm not in the mood. I'm on my period. That's okay. Carl tried again. You owe me, he said. Amelia turned around, now showing her anger. I don't owe you a damn thing, said Amelia. Bitch! Roared Carl and shoved her. Brad jumped out of the car. Dave jumped out the back door. Call 911! Grab my keys and lock the car! Yelled Brad, running away. By the time I pulled out my phone and started dialing, he was already inside. I pressed the button on Brad's key fob, heard a chirp, and headed inside. I stayed late to give the operator the address and ask for a car to be sent. Later, I watched the scene as we showed it to the arriving officers. Don't you dare touch me again, asshole! Yelled Amelia, as Brad came through the door and lunged at him. Get out of my house! Yelled Carl, sitting on the floor. You're trespassing. I swear I'm going to arrest you for assault. I'll call the police and tell them you broke into the house and tried to intimidate me. I tried to run away and it hit. Brad looked at him. Really? You must be a special kind of dumbass if you think the police would believe that. The three of us say one thing, and you say another. Brad's voice was very calm and relaxed. He saw me in the doorway. You! He shouted. I paid you not to say anything to my wife, and you did it anyway. No, I kept my word, I said clearly. I said that if you made amends to my children for messing up the family, then I wouldn't tell Amelia that you were cheating on her. And I didn't. She's the one who told me. Carl looked at Amelia in amazement. Brad told me to go outside and wait for the police. He told me to keep my hands open and empty. Explain to them what they will see and then bring them inside. I did so. I barely had time to go outside when the first car pulled up. It was followed by two more. I was surprised to see such a quick response. Of course, Carl's version of the story he laid out was very different from ours. He hadn't attacked her, hadn't had any evil intentions. The others set him up because they found out he was having an affair. As soon as the investigator saw the relevant videos, Carl was handcuffed and arrested. I made a copy for the police. Brad made sure the police understood his fears that Carl might become violent if he was released, or come back to vandalize the house. Of course, the videotape would show if he entered the house, but Brad wanted his concerns to be recorded. He said it would be easy to get a restraining order later, and he doubted that Carl would be out of jail before he was arraigned on Monday. Before Carl was led away, Brad asked the cop if he could talk to him. Brad whispered something to Carl. Brad smirked and Carl looked even more upset. When I asked him what he said, Brad replied, I told him to be careful in the city jail. Some of those guys were ex-convicts who had been arrested again and were awaiting trial. Sarah called me later when she learned of Carl's arrest. She was upset that the affair had been made public. She wanted to talk to me in person. I agreed to meet with her the next day, Sunday afternoon. We decided to meet at a nearby park. When we met, she asked me to let her speak first without interrupting. I know what you're going to say when I apologize. I heard what you said to Carl yesterday, began Sarah. But I'm really sorry. It shouldn't have happened to begin with. Carl and I have always been close and friendly, but we kept it professional. That all changed a little over a year ago when I sold 2 houses in 1 week. He took me out to dinner to celebrate. I think it was then that you, Sam, and Tina visited Greg and gave Tina a chance to see the college. We went to that really fancy place on 3rd Street. You know, it doesn't even have a menu. The waiter reads the options for each dish. I had a little too much to drink. I know that's no excuse, but I was still high. Carl was telling me how proud he was of me, and then he kissed me. It turned into a kiss. The whole thing got me hooked. Also, Carl is a very good talker. That makes him a great salesman. The next thing I knew, we were in a motel room. That was the first time. I was a little embarrassed afterward. We did that when I was selling the house. Then if he was selling the house too. After a while, we started doing it at least once a week, whether we sold the house or not. I interrupted her to ask her about it last Tuesday. Her eyes widened. But if you realized I wasn't in the mood and left me alone, that was fine. I want you to know it was never one of those things where the lover makes the wife cut her husband off. And I didn't understand anything, I said to myself. Finally, she asked me what I wanted to say. What can I say? Replied I. You know where this is going. As soon as I found out, we broke up. 22 years went down the drain. I didn't know Carl was cheating on you specifically until Friday. I knew he was cheating with someone else, but I favored you. I've already contacted an attorney, and I suggest you do the same. You should be served with a subpoena soon. Oh, and I know you're worried about me suing on the grounds of adultery. That goes without saying. I don't care if you lose your job. You won't get a dime in alimony from me. You're going to get your half of all our shit, and that's it. Sam's over 18 now, even though he's still in high school, so he can decide where he wants to live. Let the lawyers handle the details. With those words, I stood up and walked away. I heard her sobbing behind me. I didn't care. Her feelings didn't bother me in the least. I guess I was turning into a hard ass. The divorce itself was a bit anticlimactic. Neither Sarah nor I had enough money to buy each other out, so we had to sell the house. She wanted to take most of the furniture and other things. I didn't want the fancy china. I planned to buy cheap pots and pans and dishes later. Tina and Greg's things were put into storage, and the fees for the next year were paid from the utility funds. The main point of contention between us was my stock option. Sarah's attorney wanted her to get half. Unfortunately, these options are worthless until they are activated. I had options for the previous 3 years as well as the current year. Brad reviewed the Horizon rules and stated that it was a very good deal. I was able to buy shares at a discounted price, below the market price. Not only that, the price I would pay would be based on the value of the stock at the time of the offer, not the current price. Horizon Games has been doing very well in the last year or two. My early options were now worth several times their original value. However, they had to be activated and the stock had to be held for 3 years. The early options were about to expire. Sarah couldn't bring herself to part with the money. She argued that she couldn't lock up her funds for 3 years. She needed the money now. It turned out that she had passed her broker's license exam and intended to purchase Proudmoore Realty as a full partner. Since she refused to invest, my attorney had her sign a quitclaim deed. To sweeten the deal, I gave her all of my home furnishings except for clothes and personal items. I was happy to do it. As we left the meeting, Brad was ecstatic and congratulated me. I told him I didn't see it as a big deal. I couldn't afford to exercise stock options with what I had. "Oh, but you can, and you will," he said. "Amelia and I will provide the money. For that, we'll get 50% of the profits for our trust. Not that we need it, but our heirs will be provided for. And by my calculations, you'll be a rich man." At my incredulous look, he corrected himself. "Well, not a stupid rich man. But you won't have much financial worries even if you never work." Amelia and Carl's divorce was much more contentious. Brad wrote and insisted that his sister and new husband sign a prenuptial agreement. They agreed that in the event of adultery, the guilty party would only receive 30% of the joint assets. This meant that after Brad received a fair appraisal from a broker, Carl had to give Amelia all of his equity in the house and most of his cash reserve. This included most of the cash Sarah had received when she bought the partnership. Yet Sarah and Carl were confident that they could succeed in their new business partnership. I suspected that despite my pointing out what a selfish and sadistic bastard Carl could be, Sarah was fascinated. I felt compelled to give her my opinion, based on the 20 years we'd spent together. But as soon as I expressed it, my obligation ended. She was a big girl now, and could make her own decisions. One of Proudmoore Realty's main revenue streams was sales from the apartment complex. But their listings were offered one house at a time as the house neared completion. But Carl never had exclusivity. He wanted to maintain that relationship. He was very upset to learn that Amelia was thinking of bringing sales back to the company. Sarah was present as he presented his arguments to Amelia. I was invited to attend. I didn't know why, except for entertainment, to watch Carl grovel. Amelia smiled and told me to sit back and enjoy the show. Carl presented a good case. He showed how his firm would sell each house within weeks of completion, if not sooner. He pointed out what Amelia's expenses would be if she had to hire her own sales staff, open an office, etc. I was impressed. This man really was a good salesman. Amelia then took the floor. She reminded Carl how she wanted to have a baby and how he chickened out of canceling his vasectomy. Then she said, "As for the need to use Dave, that's already been decided. I tested positive yesterday." She turned to me. "I was going to tell you this in private, but I couldn't resist the opportunity. You're going to be a daddy? Again." I knew Sarah and Carl were surprised. I could have said it without looking, but my eyes were fixed only on my woman. Epilogue. Just as Amelia had predicted, Carl just couldn't bring himself to comply with her conditions and list all the houses as they were built. Tina told me later that Sarah admitted to her that she had no idea until that last meeting that Amelia had that kind of control and was really a real estate developer. Carl always complained about Amelia making suggestions, but he never allowed the idea that she was not only the brains of the company, but also the boss. Besides, she was under the impression that he controlled every ad. The loss of this revenue stream was devastating to both their personal income and the agency itself. They tried to keep the doors open, but it seemed to be a futile effort. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.